Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do my January wrap up and talk about all of the decks, the journaling, the planning, all the things from January 2025. As always, I'll leave timestamps below in case you want to jump around to any piece or part of this video. So we're going to start off with jumping into my planners because that is how I remember what I actually did throughout a month. So we'll take a look at my everyday planner. We'll talk very briefly about Gamify my life, and then we'll do the decks and then my tarot journal. So this is my Hobonichi Cousins. It is the A5 size, and this is my everyday planner. Plus, it's become a little bit of a tarot journal for me as well. So I'll talk about that as we get to those pages. I do have a whole other tarot journal, and we'll talk about that one because it is specific to the fellowship practice that I'm doing in my membership. But this one is pretty much a catch-all for everything else in my life. I do have a separate Gamify planner where I'm recording all of my progress. We'll take a quick peek at that one here in a moment as well. So let's jump into this one first because this is how I remember what I did in a month. So just jumping into the calendar for January. So the Hobonichi has all the monthly calendars at the front here. And basically all I've done is record any time that I really did a video for the most part, like my main videos. If I throw a random weird video up on our gaming channel, I usually don't record it in here. That usually goes into my gaming weeks. But when I have series that I'm doing or we have lives, things like that, I go ahead and put those in here. And this is really just a record of the content that I created throughout a month. I don't pre-plan in this. I come back and fill it in at the end of the month because I actually do all my content planning in a Google Calendar because that works better for me and I can share it across all my devices. But I like having a sort of printed, just quick reflection calendar that I can come back and look at what I did across my different channels. So then we move into our weekly spreads, I guess that's what these are called. I don't really know. Again, I fill these in after the fact as well. It just kind of gives me a snapshot of what I did throughout a week. I do kind of have like goals that I set up for the week here on the side. Any videos that I've got coming out, I put up here in these little gray boxes. And then I pretty much just kind of record little chunks of what I did just to kind of give me an idea. This is handy when I'm working in my Gamify because I can also quickly check this to see what I did, to see here like some planner stuff, some game stuff. I did a reading, some more game stuff, had date night with my husband. So things like that. This is just a quick reference for me on what I did throughout a week. As you can see, it is not decorated at all. I really don't have any intentions in decorating the weekly spreads. I'm really just using it as a way to record keep what I've got going on and what I did throughout the week. So then that brings us to the daily pages. And this is where the majority of my time spent in my Hobonichi Cousins is. Every month has this kind of like cover page. I've been doing a month ahead spread kind of, in a sense. This one kind of happened accidentally in a member video and I just rolled with it. And then I also have a list of the decks that I've worked with throughout the month because like I said, this is kind of turned into a hybrid planner / tarot journal for me. Basically what I do is I have my main task things I want to get done, as well as my priority things like my wellness stuff listed over here on the left, any videos that I have coming out. And then I kind of just track what I've got going on during the day. I have been pulling a card a day, Monday through Friday, for the most part, from the Flora Healing deck. And I've just been doodling that flower in my planner. So that's my card of the day. That's my touch base with tarot at least once, or divination, I guess I should say, at least once every day. And that's always going in my planner. So this also stays open on my desk throughout the day. So I also use this space over here just for notes, anything that I need to make note of or want to remember. On the weekends, what I'm doing is doing sticker collaging basically because I'm not pulling a card on the weekends. So my weekends have kind of been some journaling, and you'll see here as we go along that there's also some tarot journaling in here as well. So here going into the next week, if I watch a movie with Kevin, I try to remember to put a little thumbnail of that in here. As you can see, some days I've got more going on than others. Here's a good example of a reading that I did. So I'm also cataloging these readings in this little index here. So this is kind of like a daily index, and I'm basically using it to catalog anytime I do a reading so that I can very quickly come in and check that. So I know that on January the 9th, I did my Black Madonna reading, which is the one we see here. So this is working really well because these are just kind of like my everyday sort of readings. There's another one here that I did on Saturday. This is actually a wild magic reading from the Gamify where I rolled my D10s, got my question, and then did my reading here, and I did dice casting over the top of it. This was just some game stuff, another movie I watched. And you can see here that it's kind of just become a hybrid. Here's a self-care reading that I did. And I'm really enjoying this because it's a place for me to kind of put my everyday readings, to connect with my readings on a more kind of integrated way, because this is always sitting up on my desk. So while this is out, this reading is also always out. So like on Friday, this reading was still in my peripheral as I was working through things on Friday. So it's a way for me to, continue to touch base with readings as well as just have them in here. Sometimes I put game stuff in here. This is my character from Cyberpunk. Again, doing some more sticker collaging on the weekends because I don't pull a daily card on the weekends. Again, another self-care reading that I did. And we'll talk about the decks that I used. Basically, anytime I get something finished, I get to put a heart on it. That's just how I track what I've got done. This was my Gamify reading for the week, so the week prior. And I'll talk a little bit about that process, although I've done quite a few videos on it at this point. This was planning for the trip. And then I get very heavy into the memory keeping because I wasn't actually home through a lot of that this week. I'm sure as you all know, Lisa met me in Portland and we flew together to Florida where Lisa presented at StarCon, and then we just hung out. We met up with Danny. We rented an Airbnb and just had a girls' weekend, or really a girls' week, and it was amazing. This is Lisa and Kevin playing Grand Theft Auto, which was the best thing ever. Lisa had never played before. It was amazing. You can watch clips of that on my other YouTube channel. There's a link below. This is Lisa and I getting ready to head off on the plane. We basically watched all of season 1 of Arcane. Lisa hadn't seen it yet. I've seen season 1, I don't know, half a dozen times now at this point. If you have not seen Arcane, it's the most amazing cartoon. It will break your heart. So just be warned. We were bawling on the airplane. It was a thing. Anyway, so we basically watched season 1 on the way there. Caught up on a few that night. And then we met up with Danny, picked Danny up at the airport. This was our little 3 of Cups moment, which was great. We did a live chat. Thank you all who came and hung out with us during the live chat. I had my laptop, so we just went live on my channel. We hung out for like 4 hours, I think. It was amazing. We just had some girl time and some time with the community, and it was so much fun. We really, really enjoyed that. And then Saturday we went to StarCon and we watched Lisa's presentation, which was amazing, as I'm sure y'all can imagine. Got some great pictures with some people there. Sunday we went to go see the manatees, which was amazing. Monday, really Lisa and I spent a lot of time actually content planning, which was great. We did a lot of role play planning for our gaming channel. And like big thank you to Danny for not only putting up with all of our BG3 roleplay discussion, but also participating and helping us work through an issue, because I had roleplayed my character into a corner and Danny was amazing at workshopping with us how to get my character out of that corner. And it was so much fun, but also big thank you to Danny for putting up with all of our BG3 nerdiness, because you're amazing. We took Danny back to the airport, and then the next day, Lisa and I headed back to the Pacific Northwest. We took the long route from West Palm Beach to Miami, which is where we were actually flying out of, and I think it's called the Jimmy Buffett Highway, and we made some stops along the way, did a little sightseeing, and then we watched season 2 of Arcane on the plane, all except for the last episode, which we watched the next morning. After we took Lisa to the airport and dropped her off, I pretty much just spent the rest of the day just hanging out with Kevin. We just like resting, catching up, things like that. And then Thursday, I totally took a rest day off because I was quite exhausted. Also, still dealing with some back issues. And then we began the big renovation of my office and the game room, which we started on Friday, which is still not quite finished at this point, but we're making progress. And then we go into February. So I haven't added my February stuff, but that was pretty much all of what I did throughout January. And for the most part, I kind of took the last little bit of the month off. And yeah, it was great. So that's my everyday planner. Let's take a quick peek at my quest log. So this is my Gamify my life process. I've made several videos on it, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about it here. Basically, I am breaking my life down into 5 categories, and I'm gamifying the things that I do, earning some XP. And really all this is just trying to help me be mindful about where I spend my time and where I want to prioritize time. Especially like in 2025, I really want to prioritize health and wellness. So vitality, that's my main goal. So I've been really working on prioritizing that. And I've not figured out what I'm doing with this page yet, but we can take a quick flip through January stuff. I do think I still have my reading to write in here, which I need to transfer over, but that's okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm using these dots every time I do a thing that relates to one of these skills. You can see they're color coded. I put one of these little dot stickers in, and then I'm just adding up the points that I get in each. And then at the end of the week, if I've earned points in a category, I get to pull a card from the decks that I have associated with those categories for the first part of the year. And you can see here that like I didn't get any points in wisdom, so I didn't get to pull that card from that deck, and I was very disappointed in myself about that. So I definitely made sure to prioritize it the next week. So you can see here that I've got this filled out. I was kind of writing what I did. I decided I didn't like the look of that. It's a little bit overwhelming on the page for me. So I have all that information in my daily planner if I really need to look it up. But this is basically the process I'm following. Here's my reading over here. This time I did dice casting, so I also have my dice. I do believe I still need to transfer my reading. Yes, my reflections over here because I did them on a separate sheet of paper. But again, all of my dots, I did much better this week in January. Earned many more points. While I did like earn massive charisma, which is like relationship points for me, I did earn massive relationship points because I had some wonderful quality time with friends. I didn't necessarily do all the other things, and I really didn't want the stress of trying to figure it out. So I just wrote vacation and put some stickers in and called it good. It really doesn't matter overall because I don't necessarily have a point goal. I'm just trying to like do better every month. And so this works fine. And I'm like, I'll just, on Monday the 3rd, I'll just start fresh again and, hit the ground running. So that actually, I think, worked out really well. Here's what I ended up doing for my January calendar. I earned a total of 57 points for level 1. So level 1 is January, level 2 is February. And then I have my daily totals for each day. So I started out, I earned 3 points on Wednesday the 1st. I earned 4 points on the 17th. And then again, I've got my vacation time in here. So I can see how many points I earned each day. And then this is my total points for the month per category. So basically, I don't necessarily have a number goal. My goal is to just do the same or better for each month. Like I feel like my first 3, I earned 15 points in each of those. I feel like that was really good. Now, granted, I'll probably automatically do better for next month for level 2 in February because I had 2 weeks that I basically took off. So I'll have a whole extra week in there. So hopefully I'll get more than 57 points, but I feel like 15, like this seems to be like about average for me. 2 feels really, really low. This is wisdom though. So I am aiming for 4 points. So 1 wisdom, kind of touch base with my spirituality once a week. So I'm aiming for 4 points for that, 4 to 5, depending on how many weeks there are in a month. And I only got 2 in January. So that's definitely something I want to work on. And again, this is just kind of a way for me to have a snapshot look at how I'm going about my life, where I'm spending my time, and where I want to be prioritizing things. And it's just making it more of a fun process for me. I also have like the wild magic stuff that I'm doing and the dice rolls and things like that. If you want to find out more about that, I'll leave a link to that original video in the description box below for you. So I just kind of wanted to touch base. I am doing some lives with my members talking about the Gamify. We're going to kind of workshop some things together. So that'll be coming up very soon if you want to check that out. That's for the seekers and weavers in my membership in those 2 tiers. And we'll be doing a little bit of Gamify touching base. This is another Hobonichi Weeks, and this one is my gaming planner. I'm not going to really go into a lot of detail. Basically, just when we have lives, when we have games, and then what we do in games, this is just how I'm currently tracking this information. I did have a journal last year, and while I like that format, this actually works better for me because then I can just check week by week, and I'll have to go searching through a whole journal. And I just put little, screenshots in there. All of our little stream logos were in here and things we did. This really isn't like that exciting if you're not a gamer. So I just thought I'd mention it. It is a planner that I'm working with. This is my fellowship journal, and we'll come back to this after we look at the decks that I worked with. So real quick, I'm just going to touch on these. These are the decks that I'm using for my Gamify life process. Again, I have a whole video talking about these and how I'm working with them, so I'm not going to go into that here. I just wanted to do a quick touch base, mention that I am still using them. I will be using them throughout February. I'm probably just going to switch them out seasonally is kind of my thought process, but for right now, these are the ones that I'm using. Basically, when I do a thing, earn a point in a category, I get to pull a card into a reading that I do at the end of each week, or really it's the beginning of the next week, but it's for the last week. So definitely still working with all of these. It's the Bianco Nero, the Seasons of the Witch in bulk, Dark Days Tarot. This is the Lumina Tarot, the new mass market edition, and the Energy Archaeology Oracle deck. So another deck that I'm working with pretty much daily, so Monday through Friday, is the Flora Healing. And this is the deck that I'm currently using for my daily card pulls. I love this deck for so many different reasons. It's on like watercolor paper and it's just the most amazing thing to shuffle. I love that it's got the floral doodles and then we've got the messages on the back. So as you saw in my planner, basically I'm pulling one of these cards every morning. I'm doodling the flower in my planner and then just making a note of the plant, the keyword, and then pulling a little snippet out of the message here to kind of set the mood and the tone and the energy for my day. I love this deck. It's an amazing shuffle, but I also really love that the messages are on the back. I do really think that that's a great way to do an oracle because I get the messages and I don't have to have a guidebook, which is amazing. I know guidebooks are great, but like I don't want to be beholden to it, but like if it's just on the back of the card and I can flip it over and look, it probably will. So this is a fun one that I've been working with pretty much every single day throughout January, and I'm still using continuing into February. All right, and I didn't mention these. These are the dice that I'm using for my Gamify life also. And again, I show those in that one inventory video as well. And I do have the other dice that I'm working with or that I use throughout January here, so we can just take a quick peek at those. Let's talk about some of the just sort of everyday kind of decks that I worked with. To start with, this is the Avasomnia Tarot by Orla Bird. I hope I said that right. Full disclosure, this deck was sent to me for review. I've really enjoyed working with it. And I've been pairing it with the Modern Nirvana Oracle. So let's just take a quick peek at this. This is a gorgeous indie deck. I had not actually heard of this deck before this creator reached out to me, although that's not saying much because y'all know I don't really stay up on new decks. I'm kind of terrible about it. But it's got a great little guidebook with just some really fantastic, succinct keywords for upright and reversed, which I tend to use like as in blockage. And then we have just a little snippet about each of the cards, and it's a great little handy guidebook, just enough to give you an indication of the card. Here's the backs. It's a great like silky kind of cardstock. I really enjoyed working with this one. The coloration of the deck is amazing. I love the illustrations. It's a little bit pippish, as you can see, or maybe pretty pippish by some people's standards. I love a good pip deck, and this one is just absolutely amazing. The color palette is just so in alignment with like the energy. Like it makes my little Taurus heart happy. I love these earthy colors. I love the simple line art illustrations, the very limited, very restrained color palette. I feel like that's kind of a talent in itself to be able to create a deck well with a very restrained color palette and to make it still visually engaging. It's just a beautifully produced deck all the way around. I really enjoyed reading with it. I used it a lot for just kind of like everyday sort of check-ins. I used it with some work stuff. Just, you know, kind of when I just needed to like touch base with whatever was going on with me or with my life. I was just pulling this one out as a way to kind of do that. And I ended up pairing it with the Modern Nirvana Oracle. This is a deck that I use quite frequently. The guidebook is amazing. I don't have to get into it, which I really appreciate, but it's there if I need it. And I definitely enjoy the little messages in the guidebook. Here's the backs of this. And again, kind of a similar aesthetic, which is, you know, why I paired them together. It's got a little bit of a restrained color palette. The colors are a bit more muted, and it worked really well in terms of sort of energetically matching the Avasomnia. I hope I'm saying that right. I really like the keywords on this deck. I did struggle a bit when I first got this deck with, here's one with the sigils, but for the most part, like the keywords really key me into what's going on. This was one I struggled with a lot, the Rose Phoenix. But I would just get into the guidebook on those few little cards that just kind of didn't quite click for me. from the get-go, and I was able to make connection that way because the guidebook is quite lovely. Let's take a look at them together. These two decks together were amazing. I love the simplicity of it. Is that in the way? Let's just move that. I really love these two decks together. Again, that restrained color palette feels very in alignment with the energy for January. I really enjoyed working with it. It gave me such succinct messages. Like, I really didn't struggle with what message was coming through with these. Like, we have intention with the Six of Swords and the Hermit. Like, the way that these decks kind of just speak to each other, I felt like the message was really right there on the forefront. And, you know, really context is really important. I talk about that a lot. I know, probably obnoxiously so, but context is so important when you're talking about reading tarot. And so, you know, the question that I had in mind, or the intention that I had when I sat down to work with the deck, really comes through the way that I read and work with the cards. But these together, like we have Ecstasy, the Star, and the Queen of Pentacles. To me, this is about like embracing that kind of above and below energy, that internal and external, that stuff of stardust and stuff of the earth, and bringing them together in a way that really sparks joy from the inside out. It just, the way they work together was just really beautiful. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely one that is going to be hanging around my collection, the Avasomnia, for quite some time, because I really got some great succinct readings with it. It's one of those decks that, like, it's not overly fussy and it's not overly complicated, and I felt like it's like sitting down and having a conversation with like a friend who kind of just already knows you. So like, you don't need to really like explain where you're coming from, or, you know, the intricate details of things. You kind of just sit down and just kind of like, here's what's going on, and I need some advice or direction around this. And it's like this deck just delivered that in such a succinct way. And I really enjoyed it because it wasn't fussy. It wasn't complicated. It felt very nourishing and very supportive, but also very easy. And I really appreciate that, especially when I'm like in the thick of things and I'm feeling overwhelmed already. Just having a deck that is just an easy reader and that I can just kind of drop into and be like, okay, here's my struggle. What do I need to know? And then it just gives me the message that I need. And it's like a no muss, no fuss. So two other decks that I worked with throughout the month, and really for very specific sort of readings, was the World of Warcraft Tarot. And this is the Moon deck, I believe is the name of it. It is an indie deck. And this little pairing came about as I was doing a little playing with pairs here on my channel, and just kind of fell in love with these two decks together. So real quickly, let's talk about the World of Warcraft Tarot. Now, I am an OG World of Warcraft player. I've been playing on and off since the game came out, like over 20 years ago. Did the guild, did the raids, did the whole 9 yards for like a solid decade. We played religiously, and it was a whole thing. Since then, we have dropped in and out of different expansions. Kevin and I, and friends of ours, and like we really enjoyed kind of touching base with this world. It's kind of like so much nostalgia here now, because it's been kind of a part of our world and our gaming language for so long. I mentioned it in Coffee and Cards with my members for sure, and I might have mentioned it in the Playing with Pairs. This artwork really misses the mark for me. It does not look like World of Warcraft at all. It doesn't look like the game. I've been told it maybe looks like the art books. I don't have the art books, so I mean, I would like to get them someday, but if that's true, that's great. But I feel like while the world is the same and the characters are the same, I feel like the art, this soft pastel-y, watercolory vibe, just does not fit the energy of the game, which is a very sort of like fantasy RPG, like it's an MMO, right? So you're playing with a bunch of people, and you know, it's in this fantasy world, and the game itself doesn't look like this either. So the art really threw me as a World of Warcraft deck, and I actually don't look at it as a World of Warcraft deck now. I actually use it as my fantasy-based self-care deck, because that's the vibe and the energy that it has for me. It takes the idea of working with self-care and those type of readings, and in this beautiful, like soft watercolory kind of nurturing energy. And like, I think it's an absolute beautiful deck, but it completely misses the mark as a World of Warcraft deck for me. I use the Modern Spellcasters as a deck to represent World of Warcraft, because that has more of the sort of look, feel, energy of the game. So that's that's just my own personal thing as someone who's played World of Warcraft for over 20 years. That completely missed the mark. But like it's a wonderful deck. I really, really enjoy it. I definitely will be keeping it, but it's become my fantasy self-care deck, not a World of Warcraft deck. And that's fine. Like, it can sit in that space for me. I know that for other people, the whole pastel-y thing was like a selling point for them, because the World of Warcraft, that look, that feel can be a little bit dark. It's a little in your face. And like, this definitely brings it down into a softer, more gentler side. But that's not how I experience the game. Like, if you've ever had your body, your little digital pixel body, camped by a 14-year-old, and you had to go get your whole guild because you couldn't respawn because the little brat, we shall say, because the little brat killed you every time you respawned, and you had to go get your whole get, like, seriously, until you've like had that experience, that's not it. Besides maybe the connection you create with your guild members, there's no soft, cuddly, warm, nurturing thing in World of Warcraft that I found, besides like the guild members, but that's like actual people. Anyway, that's this little side tangent. The deck that I was pairing it with was the Moon deck. I do believe that is the name of this deck. This deck is an indie deck. The World of Warcraft is a mass market deck, so it's beautiful production value for a mass market deck. This deck I really love. I use it with quite a few different decks. I really like the artwork, the kind of soft pastel. It's a very feminine-based deck. It has a lot of affirmative type of messaging in it, so it works really well as a self-care deck, and these together were just amazing. Even though I showed this in a Playing with Pairs, we're gonna just do a quick flip through of them together, because this is how I primarily worked with them, with the Oracle card in the center as my focal point for my self-care message, and then looking to my tarot to expand upon that. So we have here in the center, my community is supportive, loving, and active in the world, between the Hanged Man and the King of Pentacles. I love that. So these two together, it's not World of Warcraft aside, these two just really blow my mind together. I think they work amazing. I love having like orcs and stuff in my self-care work. It makes my little gamer heart happy, because it's really bridging those two worlds together for me. Like the fact that my fantasy gamer world can exist in my real life and in my tarot space. And I absolutely love having this deck serve this purpose, because I don't feel like I have any other fantasy decks that sit so firmly in this type of a world. And I do have a little bit of a personal, like, I know it's a World of Warcraft deck, right? Like, I know that's one of the guys from the Panda Realm, right? So that is in the back of my brain. I won't discount that. It's totally there, and I probably do pull it in subconsciously. And I also probably pull in like that whole idea of running with guilds and doing things together, and that whole like teamwork that comes through playing an online game like that, an MMO. Because while Kevin and I did play like solo, just, running around on our own here and there, leveling and questing and whatnot, we did primarily play with a guild. We did primarily play with a bunch of other people who were not only real life friends, but also people we had met in World of Warcraft who built our guild. So there's that whole personal level to it as well, that whole kind of community level to it, and I think that energy comes through really well with these two decks together. And to me, that is a very nurturing, supportive thing. Thankfully, we never really had any bad experiences in guild in the game. It's just, life got busy, kids got older, you know how that goes, and you just can't dedicate as much time to, existing in these worlds as you might maybe once could. And these are good memories. I have good memories of playing World of Warcraft. I have good memories of running with our guild, and there's a lot of wonderful, supportive, nurturing things that happen. Guilds coming together to help you get things in game, to help you beat dungeons or whatever it is. We raided together, things like that. And so all of that is mixed in here with all of this. And so for me, it does pull that energy in for sure. But I think even if you don't know anything about World of Warcraft, like, you can totally still work with this deck, because it's not a World of Warcraft deck. Okay, it is. I'll stop being shitty about it. It totally is. And all the characters do relate to World of Warcraft and characters that you would see in the game. And there's actual, like, canon stuff in here, particularly in the Major Arcana. So, like, I'm just being a brat about it. But I do think that even if you don't know anything about World of Warcraft, you can totally work with this deck, because it's just a fantasy-based tarot, and it just has like a beautiful energy about it that kind of brings that fantasy energy into working with the tarot. And I think it worked really well. So I am absolutely in love with it. It is going to continue to be my self-care deck combo throughout February. I have no intention of putting it away yet. So even though I'm bratty about saying it's not a World of Warcraft deck, it doesn't look like World of Warcraft, I still am absolutely in love with it and will continue to use it. So let's end here with this one. I allow stillness to heal and reveal between the Fool and the Five of Pentacles. I just love it. It's so good. So the next little deck trio, I guess, that I worked with throughout January, and these I used very specifically for my wisdom reading, so relating back to my Gamify, but for spirituality reading. So when I'm connecting with the idea of spirit, spirituality, deity, things of that nature, these were the 3 decks that I'm working with. This is the Somnia Tarot, the Death Doula Oracle, and in here I have my Mysteries of the Black Madonna. And these are all indie decks. I do believe they are all still available, but don't quote me on the Mysteries of Mary because those decks go in and out of print quite frequently. Also, like, they're very, very expensive. I was very fortunate that a beautiful soul gifted me this copy, and I am forever grateful because it's actually become a huge part of my practice. These decks are just absolutely breathtaking together. They are hard hitters though. So I'll talk briefly about each one, I guess, and I'll share with you a little bit about how I work with them together. It's not the first time that I've shown this little trio on my channel, I don't think, because this is kind of my go-to trio now for working with Black Madonna energy. So I kind of have a specific way that I work with deity, and that includes figures like the Black Madonna, like Mother Mary, things of that nature, or other deities such as Persephone or Hades. I have a very specific way that I work with those energies, and I think I did a member video talking about that some time ago, how I work with them, how I see them. But what I was doing was pulling the Black Madonna as, I kind of use these as an oracle. Now the guidebook's really cool, especially if you don't know a ton about the mysteries of the Black Madonna. There's a lot of great information in there. I always get into the guidebook because I really want to dive into the story and the myth and the legend around what's being depicted in the card here. And so I use it like an oracle deck. I don't pull in the tarot associations at all with either this one or the other one, the Mysteries of Mary one. So I pull a single Black Madonna to be my guide, my spirit, deity in a sense, the energy that I'm going to connect with, that's going to guide me, that's going to share wisdom with me. I pull that as a focal point. I get into the guidebook to look at the story of what myths is surrounding, or what stories surrounding this particular scene depicted here. I will write in, what it is, like 3 of holy trees. But again, I don't pull in the tarot associations at all. To me, this really doesn't function very well as a tarot deck. It functions much better as an oracle. And so that's definitely the way that I use it. So I pull out a Black Madonna for my guide, for what I need to, like, who's going to guide me, what I need to know, who's going to share wisdom with me today. I really love the Somnia Tarot. It definitely has a vibe to it. It can be very challenging, and it can be an incredibly confrontational deck. I really enjoy that about it. It's very blunt, and it is not afraid to pull the shadow into the light. And I feel like just as an energy with the Black Madonna, it works so well. But I do tend to keep the amount of cards from this deck small, 2 to 3. I usually use 2 because I usually do a 4-card reading with these. So I pull these 2 out, or pull 2 cards out from this deck to get, the message basically from the Black Madonna. Again, 2 to 3 cards, but what message does that particular Black Madonna figure have to share with me? And that comes through the Somnia Tarot, the actual message that I'm getting. And this, obviously, I do read as a tarot, so I'll pull in not only the imagery and the feeling and all of that comes through, but also what does the 3 of coins mean? What does the world mean? And how do I relate that back to the reading that I'm experiencing with this particular entity here, this particular Black Madonna? And it works beautifully for that. And then what I've been doing is pulling a Death Doula card. And this I've been using kind of as a in a way, sort of a wrap up. Like, what do I need to know? Like, what's my takeaway from this message now? I really like the keywords in this deck. I think the art is really cool too. I really enjoy the art. I like the way it pairs with the Somnia and the Black Madonna. I think they just work really well together. But it is really the keywords for me. I do occasionally get into the guidebook, but not always. I don't always feel like I need to. Sometimes I get enough off the keyword and the imagery that gives me what I need to know to walk away for the reading. And it's just a really interesting one because it has a sort of different energy than your typical sort of affirmation deck, oracle deck. It's not an affirmation oracle deck by any stretch of the imagination. It sits for me more in that shadowy realm. And so these three together are just amazing because they kind of exist in the same on the same wavelength. It's like they're kind of speaking the same language, and I think they're just absolutely beautiful together. So we'll just kind of flip through a couple together just so you can see how they work. Again, I really love the energy of how all of these decks really move together. They really speak together. I feel like I'm getting that sort of guiding energy from the Black Madonna. I got cards going everywhere. And really getting that messaging from the Somnia, and then that sort of takeaway from the Death Doula. And again, this is an incredibly spiritual experience. It's also a very powerful experience. I don't do these all the time. Like, I'm very selective in how I do them and when I do them. I also need to make sure that I'm kind of like in the right mind space to be receiving these messages, because they can be incredibly confronting. It's always messages that I need, but it's very confronting, and I have to make sure that I'm in the right headspace to actually receive the message and to do something productive and constructive with it. So that's always really important when I'm working with decks like this, is to be mindful of where I'm at in my own headspace, and am I ready for a message like this, or do I maybe need to go to something like my World of Warcraft Moon deck because I need something that's a bit more nurturing, hand-holding, a bit more in that sort of self-care realm, versus kind of confronting the inner parts of myself that I don't always like to acknowledge or want to see. You know, you could call it shadow work. I know a lot of people that is what they would consider shadow work. To me, it's just a part of practice. Shadow comes up naturally, just in the way that I work with things and the way that I do my readings. So I don't usually set out to do shadow work in that way, but that kind of messaging and that kind of energy tends to come through when I have certain deck combos on the table, because I think those decks are just more naturally attuned to that, or I have personally more naturally attuned them to that energy by working with them in that way. And so that's really how I've experienced these three together. But I think they're just absolutely amazing. I love the way they speak. It's a very profound, very intentional pairing that I feel like these three together just really have something really potent and important to say, but I need to make sure that I'm ready to receive it. So before we move on to the last two decks that I work with, let's talk real quick about dice. As I mentioned, I use these dice for my Gamify. They like to get stuck in this jar. These are my liquid core dice that, like, when you swirl them around, there's liquid inside. It's really cool. These were a birthday gift from my bestie, so I use them not only for my Gamify, I also use them. They are very stubborn, which is very fitting. I also use them for some readings with the Black Madonna, Somnia, and all of that as well. So it's kind of like those are always sitting around because I use them for Gamify. For my Avasomnia and my self-care readings, so any of the readings I did with the other decks this month, I use these little pink and gold ones. I'm not really a pink person, but they really work beautifully with those decks. And these are just cheapy Amazon dice. Like, I think they were $5. Like, honestly, some of the Amazon cheapy dice are my favorite. And then the dice that I used for the fellowship, which is the guided tarot practice that I do in my membership, and I use these decks for, which we'll talk about here in a moment. I'm sure you've seen them a million times on my channel. But the dice I used for that are these little black and white ones, again, just off of Amazon. I love these dice. They're some of my favorites. I use them all the time, particularly with the Dreaming Way Tarot, which is what this is right here. But anytime we had dice casting stuff, which is sort of a bonus action in the membership this year, those are the dice that I used for that. The decks that I used exclusively for January in the Fellowship is the Dreaming Way Tarot. I don't know why I still have the guidebook in here. It just cracks me up every time. I do have multiple copies of this deck because I do have one that's trend. For whatever reason, I'm just into using the border one these days, so that's the one I keep gravitating toward. And then we have the Hedge Witch Botanical Oracle. This is like one of my favorite deck combos. Like, I absolutely love these decks. I love them together. The Dreaming Way is like one of my most used decks. It's kind of like, you know, up there in the top 10. If I ever did that video, this would be one of the decks that would definitely be hitting up in that upper one or two. There's just something about it that just really speaks to me. I've loved it ever since I've had it. Again, like I said, I have another copy that I trimmed down. For whatever reason, wanted the white borders back, so I have 2 copies of it. That's how much I love it. There are very few decks that I have multiple copies of, and that's kind of a key thing for me. If I have multiple copies of it, it's also usually because I've modded one and I have an unmodded version. I have a few decks that are like that as well, but this deck just, I don't know, it just gets me, man. It's just an easy reader. I love it. I love the aesthetic of it, like the whole vibe of it. It feels like me. And I know if you've been here for like a hot minute, I used to say the Llewellyn Tarot was me, and it is still me in a sense, but I feel like it was me 5 years ago, and I feel like this is me now because we grow and change as people. And like, I feel like this deck more represents where I'm at now in my life. There's a little bit of like coming back to not really childhood, but like the younger years. Like I had kids really young, so I don't really get to have my 20s because like I was a mom with babies. And so, and now that I'm an empty nester in my, you know, mid 40s here, we're kind of experiencing that. And I feel like this deck kind of represents that, and maybe that's what it is. And anyway, I love it. So I've been pairing it with the Hedge Witch Botanical, which is kind of my go-to pairing for this deck because it's just the simple floral illustrations. We have the succinct keyword. We do have a note of what plant it is, which is always helpful, but I love the keywords in it. I love the line art. I love the pops of color. It really helps the images and the art shine through the Dreaming Way, so it creates a wonderful support for it without overwhelming it, and I think that's really fantastic. Also, the keywords are great. So we have tenacity between the 2 of Swords and the 9 of Pentacles. Like, beautiful. These were the 2 decks that I used exclusively throughout the Fellowship for January. I have decided that as of right now, I'm only going to use 1 Tarot, 1 Oracle for that practice. I'll be swapping them out every month to sit in alignment with what we're working with and the energy and our focal point for each month, our kind of growth work for each month. Look at the colors, the yellow, the yellow, the yellow. That's the other thing I love about this combo. I love working with colors in this little combo. It's amazing. Where the color draws my eye. So where the yellow is across these 2 cards. And what does that tell me about caution? Sorry, I got off on a side topic, but anyway, I love working with these 2 because our theme for January in the Fellowship was Once Upon a Time, and it was basically about connecting with our own story before we dive into the stories of others. And so it was really about who we are, where we're at, and what our personal narrative is as of this moment. Because we need to kind of understand who we are and where we're at before we can dive into, you know, exploring self through the lens of these other stories, which is kind of the whole theme for the Fellowship for 2025. There is some Gamify stuff in it. There is dice casting, but that is all bonus, so you don't need to do that. It's just there if you want it. But otherwise, we are focusing on personal growth through the lens of narrative stories, so through the lens of familiar fairy tales and folklores and things like that. Ooh, my tower is upside down. So yeah, it's been really, really cool to reconnect with this deck in that way, because talking about a month where it's, you know, looking at my own personal narrative, my own story, this deck really feels like it reflects me in a very succinct way. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for January. And then moving into February, we're exploring the story of Snow White. So I've got decks picked out that are fit more in alignment with that energy as well. But yeah, these are just 2 of my favorites. I mean, I could flip through these all day and just be happy as could be just showing you these, but I know I've shown them 100 times before. So that's it for the decks that I worked with in January. Let's take a quick peek at the tarot journal that I'm creating for the Fellowship. So this is kind of one of the reasons why I'm doing my tarot journaling in my planner now, mostly because it's convenient, but also because I decided to kind of go with an odd size for my fellowship journal. This is an Archer and Olive notebook, and it is a traveler's notebook size. Now, I don't believe I've ever tarot journaled in a proper traveler's notebook size. I've tarot journaled in traveler's notebooks, but not at this size. And so I just thought it would be fun to try it at a new size and to just try something different. I am making this exclusively for the fellowship practice, which is called Enchanted Library for 2025. It's available to those at the Weaver level of my membership. And basically it is a whole guided tarot practice. Now, I did a video with my members talking about this. This is my oops page, and I've left it because, for one, it reminds me that this book does not have to be perfect, but also if I want to test something, like I'm testing markers here, things like that, testing layouts, things of that nature, I've got space to do that. So it's an oops page reminding me that I don't have to be perfect, but also it allows test space. And then I accidentally skipped a page, so now I've got more test space or whatever. At the end of the year, I will basically just glue those pages all together so that when we open the book, we will actually go into chapter 1. Oh, I'm probably gonna do a cover. That's what I was gonna do, because I kind of forgot to do, I like to do a cover each month based on the PDF. So there's a printable PDF that you get, or you can use it digitally, that has all the prompts. And there's usually like images and things like that. And I want to put the cover in here. So that's what I was gonna use that space for. So I kind of wanted, because of it's the Enchanted Library, I kind of wanted it to look like a book. How I journal in here will probably change month by month, because that's just how my journaling is in a general sense. I very much journal like in alignment with my mood and the type of work that I'm doing. So because I was working with the Dreaming Way, talking about stripping things away and getting back to self, I wanted to keep things very simple. I do have the narrative, so every month begins with a narrative just to kind of put us into the space that we're in, tell us about the story that we're going into, how we're working our way through this whole, there is an overarching story as well. It's not near as complex as the one from last year, but there is one. And so I've got that in here. There's a few like key elements of things, like the key features predominantly in the story and things like that. And I've got my archetypal energy, which I roll for at the beginning of the month. So Hermit was my archetypal energy coming into January. And I have my decks that I worked with here. And then we go into each of the weekly prompts. So I have basically my reading that I did, the prompts, the cards that I pulled, and then my reflections for each of those weeks. So we had week 1 and week 2, week 3, and week 4. So you can see that like I kept it pretty simple because I kind of wanted it to mirror that idea of the kind of simple artwork of, and I don't mean simple, like less busy, I guess, art of the Dreaming Way. That's one of the things I really like about it. So I kind of wanted to incorporate that in here. Also, my stickers are usually pretty dang intentional. Like I spend a lot of time like finding stickers that I feel like really sit in alignment with the reading that I had. So each of my stickers also create a part of the reading, and they kind of reflect what's going on in the message that I'm taking away from it. So I'm going to be basically recording the entire journey in here. Like I said, in February, we are doing The Mirror and the Apple, which is based on the story of Snow White. And so we've got some prompts and activities and things like that, working with that energy all throughout February. Again, if you want to find out more about that, you can check out, there's links below to my membership, things like that. So that was a look at the planners, decks, journals, and things of that nature. A few memory things from January 2025, kind of what I did in my tarot practice and how I kind of go about this whole process. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you had a wonderful January, and I wish you many blessings moving into February.